subjects, okay, have the unreserved right to petition the monarch. It doesn't say those words. It says the subject has the right to petition without retribution, is what it's saying. I.e., as soon as they are not fit for purpose, you have every right to express your grievance how you want. I.e., protest, some people will do, some people will go to the courts. Do what you want. And if they stop you, they are in breach of contract. They are there to uphold your rights in this contract. So the royal prerogative must enforce that every person can express their grievance without retribution. And this is where equity comes in, okay? The subject's rights. Equitably, what does that mean? Every person who is being governed. The royal prerogative can't have a standing army unless, in times of peace, unless Parliament says so. The subjects, which are Protestants, may have arms for the defence suitable to the conditions and as allowed by law. Again, let's apply equity. Protestants, that's discriminatory, unlawful. Equity, all equal under the law. Everybody has the right to bear arms suitable according to law. According to law means if you've got a nuclear bomb, I have every right to have a nuclear bomb and you can't stop me. So when the police come with their helmets and tasers and God knows what, you have every right to have equal arms to defend yourself. Problem is about enforcement. Freedom of speech, says only elected members of Parliament ought to have freedom of speech, apply the rules of equity, which they themselves say prevail, means everybody's got freedom of speech. Now, freedom of speech, what is that? Freedom of speech is not knowingly causing another harm. And that means that you can't attack a personality, you can only attack a principle. And the other thing to bear in mind is harm. How I choose to feel is my choice. So if you transgender and take offense at what I've got to say, that's your choice, that's your problem, not my problem. The truth is, we define a male like this and we define a female like that. However, I cannot treat you any differently to anybody else. So we've got to distinguish this the way that it works. So that's freedom of speech. Now, what it actually says, and this comes back to parliamentary sovereignty. When they're talking about parliamentary sovereignty, what they are saying is, we have the right to freedom of speech in Parliament, which cannot be impeached or questioned by anybody. So what they're saying is, we here are in Parliament, okay, and nobody from outside can tell us what to do or how to say or what to do, or how we do things. I.e., my home is my castle. Perfectly lawful. I have no right to tell you how to run your house and what you do in there. I have no right to tell Parliament the same thing, and therefore the whole question of parliamentary sovereignty is, can the courts interfere in parliamentary business? So the first two articles say the royal prerogative is totally subjective to Parliament. You will do what I say when I say it. So the Boris Johnson debate was, can Boris Johnson do what he wants without approval of Parliament? So unless there was an express act of Parliament to say, no, you can't, i.e. a constraint on royal prerogative, like they cannot levy money without Parliament saying yes. They cannot have standing armies without Parliament saying yes. So Parliament has the power to constrain royal prerogative. It cannot expand it. It can only constrain it. Because royal prerogative used to be the king can do what the hell he likes when he wants. So, then excessive bail, basically threats and coercion. The royal prerogative must ensure that no grants or promises of fines or forfeitures of any person before conviction are illegal and void, as determined by trial by jury. Every single case should be trial by jury. I'm not a friend of trial by jury, but that's my opinion. Everybody's entitled to them, and we'll talk about that. And the royal prerogative must ensure that there's no interference with elections and that Parliament can sit frequently. So there you've got a list of constraints of your rights and sets out, guess what? Parliament is the master of the royal prerogative. The royal prerogative has the authority to create the governance structure and the judiciary. However, they are subject to, and there blows out of the water this nonsense about separation of powers by their own admission. Okay? Now, when you go through that, the said rights claimed, they tendered the Crown and limit the authority of the Crown with the royal prerogative. And in there, when they accepted, when William and Mary accepted, they accepted on behalf of the people, not only the subjects. I just want to find that. That all and singular the rights and liberties asserted and claimed in the declaration above are true, ancient, indubitable rights and liberties of the people. So it doesn't matter if you want to call it a subject or a voter or this or that. This here is to every person. Black, white, slave, doesn't matter. So these terms and conditions have been agreed in perpetuity whilst they use this as their claim of authority to govern. Anyway, it's in there somewhere. The heirs and successors. So what you've got is, by their own admission, master is people, because they are representatives, they are agents, and we've entrusted them to control government to uphold our ancient rights and liberties, and they've admitted they can do nothing to our prejudice because they have no authority. You can choose to have violence put upon you. If people go boxing or, I don't know, do lots of things, you can consent to being harmed. But without consent, nobody has authority to tell you to do anything. And equity is simply the conscience. This is what's the universal connector of all of humanity globally. It doesn't matter your colour, your race, your belief, nothing. Your conscience dictates right from wrong. And you have the right to do whatever your conscience dictates, so long as you don't do another harm, knowingly. So, stand on that right, do what you want. When somebody questions that right, he who asserts must prove, because you innocent until proven guilty. And if somebody challenges you, you equitably have to stop your behaviour and prove you're not doing harm, i.e. cease and desist until the dispute is settled. Now, if we can't resolve these disputes in private, then we need to go for public dispute resolution. And it's in the public dispute resolution where we create common law precedents. And in the confirmation of the Charters 1267, I still haven't got around to putting all of this detail in, Basically, it defines the common law as the law of the land as the guiding principle of governance. And it says the Great Charter is the common law. So the common law means the Great Charter. The Great Charter is basically Magna Carta 1297, which is what they accept. Okay? I mean, most people haven't even bothered to read Magna Carta 1215. I'm not interested about the inheritance of the barons' wives and nonsense like that. Most of that's nonsense. However, the substance, the common law, the ancient right and liberty of trial by jury is expressed in that. So if you want to stand on trial by jury, use Magna Carta 1297, because you can enforce that in their courts if you're after trial by jury. And then the last one I want to show you is the Act of Settlement 1700. And
sorry, could you just recap that? You said the common law and the law of the land is what?
The law of the land is common law,
Yeah.
as expressed in the Great Charter.
Yeah.
Okay? And so when people say common law, that's what it means. However, the judicial system is based upon precedent.
Right.
And hence, common law itself is the expression in the Great Charter of what was the law of the land. So when they say law of the land or common law, they're referring to the expression of that in the Great Charter. And in the courts, you set a precedent based upon the rules of common law, which are subject to the rules of equity. So if an existing common law precedent is not fair and just, you use the rules of equity to create a new precedent. And it's an obligation of every court, even if a precedent is from a higher court, they have authority to change that precedent using the rules of equity. So, they try and avoid these responsibilities by blaming, oh no, I have to follow the boss. Okay, order following is not a lawful excuse.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
It's really hard to follow all of this and remember it.
Hey, look, this is history.
That's the question
In
is-
the manuals.
Yeah, have you written it down anywhere? Have you written this all down anywhere?
No, this last piece, the definitions of common law and that will be in the new council tax skeleton argument, which will be out before 2nd of March when we call it. So but everything else is already in the course of that. It will be added.
But it's not.
Sorry, have people here got the Gmail, the manual to these?
It's on the internet.
You've got it in the manual.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
all.
it's in there.
Yeah.
Is it in the manual?
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you get the manual?
Okay, just remind me. What I want to do is just show you two more things, then we have a break.
Okay.
And then what I'll do is quickly go through the website to show you where to find what and what's there.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've given you the definitions. Again, these are their definitions, okay? These are parliamentary legislated definitions, not my opinion or somebody else's. This is what they accept. So what they had was, 1688, they made this new agreement with the king. However, the king wasn't really doing what he said he'd do. And so Parliament said, what we need to do is reinforce what we mean, because we talked about ancient rights and liberties in the Bill of Rights. What does that mean? So what they did was they created this act to better secure the rights and liberties of the subject. So this is specifically telling the king, here are some more definitions for you. Okay? And in section 4, and again, thank you to the councils because they got me to this. Okay? in section 4, because it was a dispute as to what are ancient rights and liberties, Parliament said to the King, "The laws of England are the birthright of the people thereof, and all the kings and queens who shall ascend to the throne of this realm ought to administer the government of the same according to the said laws. And all their officers and ministers ought to serve them respectively according to the same." They can only, and their job is to, uphold your birthright. Okay? So the question is, what's your birthright now? So the Act of Union then 1707, these 15-minute cities and all of that, the Act of Union 1707, they must uphold your right, freedom to travel from A to B unhindered. So all of this is in there, like 300 years ago, so why are we arguing about the same crap now? It's insane.
Scope creep.
Hmm?
Scope creep.
Scope creep. Yeah, Fiefton, same thing. Okay, so hopefully what you've got now is, hang on, nobody can tell me what to do unless I can consent to it. Because the Bill of Rights is a contract. They've contracted, they've consented. Every act of Parliament is consensual to deliver the obligations. And the Coronation Oath Act is from the Parliament. This is a contract with the royal prerogative. And what it says is, will you govern the people of this kingdom according to statutes in Parliament agreed on, hence enacted by the monarch? They are accepting the terms and conditions that are detailed there, the rights and obligations. So it makes it very clear, acts of Parliament, statutes in Parliament agreed on are the directions to govern us, the people, and the laws and customs of the same. Now, if there was a comma there, in using statutes in Parliament agreed on, comma, take out the and change that into according to, it would be absolutely clear they must govern us according to our birthright. Okay? So because of this, it was questionable and debatable as to whose customs, laws and customs. Parliament's, the monarchs, whose laws and customs. But the governance is subject to statutes agreed on and somebody's laws and customs, and in 1700 laws and customs were defined as our birthright. That clarified this, and hence in Queen Elizabeth's II's coronation oath, I promise to do you swear to govern the peoples of blah, 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 all the places, according to their respective laws and customs. So perfectly in line with the Act of Settlement 1700 to clarify what is the scope of authority of those governing. So anything which goes against your laws and against your birthright, as dictated by your conscience, you have a right to remedy, and they have no right to do anything, which is admitted in the Bill of Rights. Nothing can be done to the prejudice of the people. The independent judiciary is set up in the second promise. So governance is separate and from the judiciary, which is when you cause the laws and justice in mercy to be executed in all your judgments. So hopefully you can see now the separation of powers are actually, you have an independent judiciary, you have, whoops, you've got the, okay, I'm going to have to shout. You've got the independent judiciary.
Turn it off first, Mark.
Yeah.
It was working again then.
How is it? Are you working? Yeah. You have the independent judiciary, whose job is to resolve dispute between party A and party B. It makes no difference if it's, like was in the prorogation case, Parliament and government, but that there was actually a case brought by against Parliament, against government by one of the people, Gina Miller. Okay? So the correct separation of powers is people, judiciary, and governance. Yeah,
How did Gina Miller get Boris Johnson into court?
just the same way that if you wanted to, just bring a claim against him.
Simple as that, yeah.
Simple as that. Yeah. And you can do that both for criminal as well as civil matters. Okay. Why? All equal under the law. If I feel you've wronged me, I'll take you to court to resolve the dispute. Why? Because we have an obligation to keep the peace. And that's where it all comes to. A breach of the peace is either actual harm caused or intended harm. And nobody has the right to breach another's peace without lawful excuse. And lawful excuse means, show me the evidence that you have the right to breach my peace. And if you can't show me the evidence at the time, bugger off. So hence the policeman said, what did he say? Trade Unions Act. Not lawful excuse, my man. I'm not a member of any trade union and you've got no evidence to show that. Bugger off. Okay. So it's all really, really simple. Or in theory it's simple, but the problem is one of enforcement. And that is what the court auditor course is about. Because just like with the notices in North Yorkshire, they changed 2 out of 3, that ain't bad. But once more people know how to do it, you change 3 out of 3. Okay. So if we have a break now, then, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, and then we can carry on.